to share his ideas and give his leadership to the MPPN. Risenga Maluleke was appointed South Africa's Statistician General in November 2017, but he's not at all new to Stats SA. Before that, he was the Deputy Director General, and he's been with Stats SA for the past 20 years. And he joined initially as a manager in Limpopo in 1997. And he was responsible for that province's official data collection for censuses and sample surveys, international statistical development, and communication. And so we have with us somebody who has a deep knowledge from the very rim of statistical work into now its center and speaking voice. And related to this, he has senior executive training in Harvard Business Schools and other places as well. And so what have been the features of his leadership of Stats SA? He was involved during the Africa Symposium for Statistical Development, which resulted in 50 African countries doing their censuses in the 2010 round of population censuses, and more than 20 countries having very much needed strategies in terms of civil registration and vital statistics. He's also been a member of the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building for statistics in the 2030 agenda. And he represented South Africa in many, many different fora, obviously in the UN Statistics Commission, but also on emerging issues such as big data and the inherent program of data revolution in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Minister said, in the development of the Agenda 2063 across Africa. And so we're really delighted to have this person with such a great global view, with such a deep understanding of the context here and of the national context of South Africa to address us at this 6th annual MPPN meeting that he is also hosting. So please welcome the Statistician General.
I see here, Sabine, as I come, it's written 1 minute, so I assume I have 1 minute of speaking. There is a note here that says you have 1 minute. So my take is that indeed I have 1 minute. But otherwise, thank you again, Sabina, for such an elaborate introduction. I do not know whether I will live up to your expectations in the way that you have introduced me. But lest I forget, let me note our sister and deputy minister from Chile responsible for social evaluation, Ms. Alejandra Candia Diaz. It's always very good when you have your leaders and have discussions in fora of this nature with your leaders. I have seen fellow statisticians, my brother Camilo Ferreira Decatur is here. We always meet. He's head of statistics for Angola. Ndate Muntsiwa from Botswana, from policy side in the president's office. We had a very good discussion last night with Gonzalo, and of course he's here, and him and I have swapped places. Of course, if I forget my sister, Miss Bonnie, Marie-Jose from the Seychelles, she won't allow me, Sabina, to set foot there. But let us talk about knowledge and the need for knowledge, and knowledge and science, because we are experts and we are supposed to talk about things that matter in the milieu of things all over the world. The first thing that we should look about around us is that science has always given opportunities to experts in terms of the search of knowledge. But as it happens, it's not abstract knowledge or abstract science, we create theories, and one of those theories is this one of the multidimensional poverty index. When we create theories, it's got nothing else than just creating knowledge. But beyond that, we are creating power. The power with which to intervene. So the world over, those who discovered the atomic bomb, they were not interested in the theories. Those who decided to capture the understanding of lightning and the way atoms work in the space had nothing of interest in just discovering new theories. The force of gravity, their interest was using that information, using those theories to come up with power. But what is it that we talk about when we are in positions of leadership? Scholars have written, and they've written quite elaborately on that. One of the things they have raised is that there is always the power to understand. It's always very good to understand something. In his book, Angus Deaton, in his book, The Greatest Escape, he says that the world over, we are caught up in a need to want to act, but we never have enough time to try and understand. So we never diagnose the problems sufficiently enough. And because we never diagnose them sufficiently enough, we are sometimes missing the goal when we are supposed to actually hit the ball to the net. So the power to understand is something else, but also the power to intervene. So there are theories that help us to understand issues. There are theories that help us to intervene. And when we have intervened better, that's when we have come up with issues of planning, monitoring, and evaluation in some of our countries. Look at Newton. In 1687, Newton comes up with a theory. He says that if you know the mass of an object, and you know the direction which it's moving towards and it's headed to, and you know the forces acting on it, you will be able to determine the future position of that object. So what is it that we do with this knowledge that we have? What is it that we do with this theory that we have of MPI? Are we able to say we understand the subject that we are dealing with? The weight of poverty in the whole world. If we understand the weight of poverty in the whole world, and we know where it's headed to because we can measure it if it's declining or increasing, and we know all elements that are playing around this notion of poverty, are we able to determine how we will colonize it in future? Because if we can't colonize poverty, we should know the world is finished. Of course, theory is very interesting because the whole area of science and knowledge is premised on the issue of being ignorant. So the world says, because we are ignorant, we seek to know more. And theories do sometimes get challenged. As it happened with Newton. And indeed, yes, as it happened with Newton. When his theory came in there, nobody at the time thought of quantum physics. Nobody thought of the whole issue of the theory of relativity. Nobody thought about that at the time. So the question is, what are other theories that may unseat us if we do not continue to be in search of knowledge? The late and former Egyptian president, Anwar Sadat, and may God rest his soul, he wrote a book, and it's out of print now. It's called In Search of Identity. What kind of identity are we searching for the world? Using the kind of theories and knowledge that we have. Of course, it's only when there are problems in the world It's only when there are problems in the world that we are able to find solutions for them. Alexander Webster and his friend, Robert Wallace, not my sister Alexandra Diaz. You might have gotten the name from there. Yeah. Alexander Webster and Robert Wallace, these were clergymen seated in Scotland. And they are seated there in Scotland. They are worried about what is happening. They know they have other clergymen scattered throughout Scotland. And as they sat there, they said, what will happen to these clergymen, the people of the cloth? Then it was only men, there were no women of the cloth. When they die, they are going to leave families. What will happen to their widows? How do we take care of them? How do we make sure we take care of them so that we make contributions and we make them do contributions while they are still alive? So in 1744, they went to approach a professor and they said, help us. We want to know how many clergymen are there? How many will die per year? How many will leave widows? How many will be outlived by their widows? And how many will have children surviving? And of course, it's complex. These are complex problems. So they went there, they tried to come up with solutions, and luckily they could start to concoct some actuarial tables of the time. But that was not enough. That was not enough until Jacob Bernoulli, who we know very well as statisticians, came up with a theory of the law of large numbers. And Jacob says something. He says, you cannot be able to determine or predict sufficiently enough an event, a single event. And because you can't predict it, you have a serious problem. But you can predict an average outcome of events and be able to say accurately when those events will happen. If there are many, so if you have many. So averages come in and the like. So the question is, with this knowledge that we have now, how much are we able to make predictions of what will happen to the world? To determine and measure what is happening now is something else. But to have to determine what will happen in future, like the challenges that Robert Webster and his friend Mr. Waleke were having in 1744. If in 1744 they could come up with solutions to this problem, how comes we can't have the solutions to the problems of poverty? So we have a serious issue that we need to deal with in the world. The world has gone together, and the world is very interesting, Program Director Sabine. The world is very interesting because we are full of theories. One of the things we came up with is that we want to go global, so globalization is the in thing now. So everyone is talking about globalization and everything. And we were very good in the global leaders set in 2000 at the United Nations, during the United Nations General Assembly. They decided we will also deal with matters of Millennium Development Goals. And yonder into 2015, the post-2015 development agenda kicked in the name of the Sustainable Development Goals. But as we would know, hunger and poverty are still there, and we have to resolve them. We have to solve them. And in the process of that, we have come up not only with global programs of the world, but we have also come up with regional programs. The Americas have their own programs. Here in Africa, we have what we call Agenda 2063. And even nations, we have our own national development plans. We have all these plans around us. And lest we forget, we had started talking about what we call globalization. But the world is unbundling. The British exit is something else. Is the British exit a solution towards a global world, or about a nation that is creating a singular stage for it to intervene on its own problems alone and leave the others, especially those that are poor? So we need to address those kinds of issues. And we as experts will be left to come and to solve the problems. Because as we are left to solve the problems as experts, one thing that we should know is knowledge and theories will come back. In European medieval times, you were well respected when you had the knowledge of grammar, the knowledge of rhetoric, the knowledge of philosophy. That's why the first mathematicians and statisticians and scientists and experts were called philosophers. They were called upon to come and solve problems whenever there were problems. We will be called upon again in the world that is disintegrating, because it is disintegrating. Every nation cares for itself now. Nobody cares. And when it rains in the mountains, we know it from my village. When it rains in the mountains, only those that are down in the valley will be taken out by the water and the mudslide. We always know it. If we don't believe it, remember what the Lehman Brothers did. The Lehman Brothers went on and they didn't close their books. They were making money every day. And when there was a global economic meltdown, who were the people to suffer? The poor. So we know it. And what is our role as experts? And as experts, we will be called upon. Indeed, we will be called upon, a program director. We will be called upon to come and deal with other issues. The racial nature of poverty. The racial nature of poverty. In many nations, and indeed the world over, it is assumed that you are well off when you are white. And in most cases, you can't be poor. And the non-whites are the ones that are poor, and the ones that have to be poor. We cannot just sit and come up with theories as experts if we cannot deracialize this issue. It's the first time, I'm surprised, program director. It's the first time that I hear that theories and philosophies know the color of the skin. Because my knowledge and my understanding of theories and philosophies is that they should never know the color of the skin. So somebody out there, those that are in power, have gone to concoct and create structures that take out other people on the basis of their skin color and leave others and protect them and privilege them. And we cannot allow that to happen. Not when we call ourselves experts. Applause. We need to break down the structural legacies of poverty and unbundle the racial lines. Because we are the ones who carry the knowledge. We are the ones who carry the knowledge. We need to explain to children of the future why people in the Balkan region, why people in Bosnia, why people in Damascus, why people in Tonga and Vanuatu in the Southern Pacific, why people in Papua New Guinea, why they are poor, much more poorer than people in Western Europe. We need to explain, because future generations, when we are no more, and they want to find solutions, they will go to the theories that we have designed and the formulae that we have designed as experts. The South African experience is a very interesting one. And as we all know here, that until about 20 years ago, we had what we call apartheid here. So a person of my skin color could not stand here in front of yourselves and talk. It was unheard of, because I was a subhuman. And how can the world, with all the brilliant minds, allow other human beings to be subhuman? And now when we look at poverty in South Africa, we can easily tell, that when you are black, and in particular being a black female, you are likely to be more poorer than any other person. Worse off when you are in rural areas. And politicians meet us as statistician general. I get called upon. They want to ask me, we are 20 years into democracy, Mr. Statistician General. And when they want to sweet talk me, they even call me comrade. Say, we are 20 years into democracy, Mr. Comrade. And they say, now, comrade, tell us, why are the people still protesting in the street? A is because while headcount poverty has been declining and been decreasing, the intensity, which is the average of those who are still poor and those who feel poor, the intensity still remains the same. So even when you have a very few people who are poor, the fact that they feel poverty the way they were feeling it, it's still the same. We can deal with other issues. We can deal with other forms of poverty. We can deal with the biological form of poverty. We can deal with how many calories someone needs to take on a particular day. But there are other issues that are coming in. The whole issue of data around us. The fact that the fourth industrial revolution is kicking at a pace that we cannot control is much more serious. The fact that we are talking about before we even talk about the data of things, the chairman of the World Economic Forum, he says something very interesting. He says something very, very interesting because he says that the world will need to be agile enough at a personal level and at a national level so that we can respond to issues and challenges that are there. But as we are talking now, there's data everywhere, so everyone can come and predict poverty and say what will happen. And what is it that we will ground when artificial intelligence is in? Those of us who have the knowledge now, what is it that will ground? Because artificial intelligence, what will it mean for multidimensional poverty and indicators? What will it mean? When machine can learn from machine and data can learn from itself, what will it mean? Today when you go on a website, you go to Google, you go to O'Reilly or anything, you type any problem you have on earth. There are about 1,000 specialists and experts out there who are already data scientists who are waiting to provide a solution. And then they line up and bid and say, if you want a solution in 5 hours, we'll give you a solution, this is the amount, this is the amount. But can poverty be traded? Can issues of poverty be traded? Because with big data, we have a serious problem. We have a serious problem because the trading of data and information will become a lot more expensive. And those of us who must deal with this issue, can it be traded? Program director. There's always a legend coming out of my village. They say once I start talking, I don't stop. But the biggest question that we need to ask ourselves and respond to, because nobody will respond to, is when big data is there, when everything is there, what knowledge will we have? Out of the days of Newton, out of the days of Robert Waleke and Alexander Webster, out of the days of Jacob Bernoulli, and of course in our times and the times of the future, where will the knowledge that we are living the world with and the expertise and the theories that we live the world with, where will they be? And wherever will they be, wherever they will be able to solve the problems of the generation that is not even born yet? I thank you.
Thank you so much. That's just such a passionate and yet informed talk, challenging us in each of our role. And it's a challenge that we need, but it's also, I believe, a challenge that we welcome. To think not only do we understand, but also can we use our power? Not only can we become experts, but can we colonize the poor? And how do we think and navigate our world of measurement and policy in a world of big data, artificial intelligence, and the challenges of the new generations? So this is really central to our agenda, but also expanding what we've discussed so far, and we're ever so grateful. So I think it's not a time for questions, it's a time for self-reflection, for taking these words in, remembering them, and seeing how we can help each other to respond. So with that, I would simply ask for a round of applause again for our keynote speaker. So we will now move to a separate session. I don't know, do you want to take any questions?
If there are questions, I'll take
Okay.
them.
Are there any questions or discussions or points before we move on? I think you've made them very pensive. So then what we will do now, while you are thinking, and we will have the afternoon together, and there will be closing comments. And in those session of closing comments, where we go around the room once more, and each person says what commitments they're making for the year to come, I would request that as you think in these next few hours what your commitments are, you let this powerful challenge echo within your being. And I think our commitments in that session will reflect your energy and your call upon us. So in the next session, the countries will stay here, and the agencies will go into the next room, and we will have discussions about some issues related to the SDG indicators, and in a sense how we can very practically take this work forward. So Gonzalo and others will adjourn to the next room, and the country groups will stay here. And if I might request to come into the inner U-shape, I think that would be a more appropriate location for our next session. So if we might make that movement and convene in 3 or 4 minutes.